Hello and welcome to The Big Story. This is Anjali and today we are joined by...
Hi guys, I am Garima Sadhwani. I am a health correspondent with the Quint. And Anjali and Pratik have forced me to say this, but I am very excited to be on this podcast.
I would like to say it is only Pratik because she's been trained under Pratik because sadly he's not a part of this podcast. So we will miss him and I will have to take the burden of using metaphors and cracking jokes, which is usually his forte. But today, in his absence, I'm going to have to do that. Or Garima, if you want to take up the challenge of cracking Pratik level jokes, you can.
I am very sorry, I cannot do that. मतलब उस लेवल पे तो बिल्कुल नहीं. But I'm assuming उसको फोमो बहुत होगा ये सुन के. Like जब पॉडकास्ट लाइव जाएगा वो सुन रहा होगा, वो बीच में अपने इंटरवेंशंस देगा. यार मैं ये जोक मार सकता था यहाँ पे.
I can feel his angst. But that being said, we are trying to make this episode a very fun and interesting one. But before we do that, what is this podcast about, Garima?
It's about mental health because, as we know, it has a lot of stigma associated with it. But thankfully, because of social media part of it, because, Gen Z is trying to
normalize. I'm holding air quotes in my hand. It is normalizing talking about AI.
Mental health. But we are also going to be talking about AI, artificial intelligence. Because as you and I were discussing isse pehle, there's not a lot of talk about the intricacies of AI. या तो तुम्हें एकदम उसके fanboys मिलेंगे, या एकदम लोग मिलेंगे जो डिस्कार्ड कर देंगे, या तुम्हें लोग मिलेंगे जो बहुत डर रहे होंगे कि ओ AI तो मेरी जॉब छीन लेगा. But where are the nuances of how AI relates to things that are a part of our everyday life?
And I think to do that, you need to get into the details of how it works. We've tried to do that with the first episode of this series, where we got an AI policy researcher. His name is Anupam Guha. He really got into the intricacy of how AI was developed, what it is meant for, how it is currently being used, and what are the policy concerns around it. So, Garima, this is a question / a disclaimer to our listeners. Have you had any personal experience with mental health? Have you ever sought counseling or gone for therapy?
No, I haven't. Like in my personal capacity, I haven't spoken to any counselors, therapists, psychiatrists, psychologists, none of those people. But because I'm a health reporter, a lot of my stories do concern mental health, and I've extensively spoken to a lot of these people. But with personal experience and with the insights from our experts today, I think there would be a curve of learning about mental health, about AI, and how the two of them intersect.
Yeah. And I am one step behind you. I haven't even spoken to a mental healthcare professional, no psychologist, psychiatrist I've ever spoken to. So a lot of my information comes from my conversation with friends who've sought mental health care, and the other source being the infamous social media. Although I don't take them too seriously, but that is a lot of my source of information, which is not the best.
And I think कि आज हमारे listeners भी शायद उतने ही curious हों जितने अंजलि और मैं हैं as hosts for this episode, because we'll probably get to learn a lot about how and what these two topics entail and how they come together.
So let us talk a little bit about who are the guests that we have on this podcast. So we are joined by Dr. Samir Parikh, who is a very eminent psychiatrist who works at Fortis Healthcare. And the other guest that we have is Dr. Megha Gupta, who is the head of AI at a mental healthcare app called Wysa, which uses an AI-based chatbot to guide their users through very initial stages of mental health care. And we're going to talk to them generally about how AI has entered the mental health care space and what is it that it can do, cannot do? Alright, so without wasting any more time, let us jump right into the conversation.
Hello, Dr. Parikh. Hello, Dr. Gupta. Thank you for taking out the time to speak with us, and welcome to the Big Story 2.0.
So, just to start off, I would like to ask Dr. Parikh. So, you've been working in mental health for quite a while now. When did you first see the use of technology in general, and then you can answer specifically about the use of AI?
No, I think the right answer to this would be not merely about when would I see. It's also a lot of this depends upon what is evidence based. It's also depends upon the law of the land, right? So a very basic example would be, let's say, pre-COVID. Even if I would have had to do, let's say, a teleconsultation, I couldn't have done it because I was in no way to make a prescription as a psychiatrist of a medication.
Oh, right.
And then when COVID happened and we all realized the importance and the power and the connect of telemental health, today, even a few years to that big 2-year phase that all of us went through, I'm still doing more teleconsults than physical consults. So if you look at it from my vantage, almost 25 years of being in psychiatry, and now how much it has changed just over the pre and post COVID. I now do more teleconsults. So I think one needs to also understand this. When we talk about digital, when we talk about AI, it's exciting. Yes, it's innovative, it's game changing, especially for a branch like mental health, which has for decades been under the burden of stigma, discrimination, lack of access. All of this has been there, that even today, 3 in 4 people who would be needing to go to a mental health professional do not go. At the same time, there is a significant disproportionate spread of mental health professionals. So, for example, in high income countries, it may be as high as 70 per lakh, and in low income countries, it may be as low as 1 per lakh. And if you look at our country
Right.
also, the percentage, let's say, in the metros, urban areas, as compared to as we go away from urban landscape, the access to professionals becomes lesser and lesser. So what's our option? Our option is digital connect, the digital transformation, digital India, which is a solution. And of course, which AI also coming in, gradually increasing. These are new times. I mean, be very clear about it. If we allow ourselves to believe that we've arrived when it comes to AI, we've not. But then that's what AI is. It's evolving, it's learning. But I see this in a continuum, that let's say way back in 1950s, when the first medication came, till 70s when better medications came, and 1990s, which was largely a decade of psychiatry meds, and then you move forward, and today you're also talking about telehealth, and you talk about AI as an interface, which could be the first interface, and who knows what happens in years to come. So look at it in this way, and then you'll be able to have a more evolutionary perspective to how the branch and science is growing.
So, Dr. Parikh, we're going to talk about all of these things. The lack of mental health professionals, how this moved to teletherapy, like you just spoke about, is very, very recent, especially after COVID. But before we do that, like, I want to know from Dr. Gupta. So, since, like he mentioned before COVID, just internet as a medium to be used for therapy did not exist. So when did you start your research of developing Wysa and coming up with an AI based application?
So I was not part of the founding team of Wysa, but the Wysa opportunity happened to fall in my lap very luckily. I was in a transition phase. I worked in education earlier, and I was looking for a new exciting opportunity to work on, and somebody just contacted me, and I was really very driven by the vision of Wysa, and I was wowed by, AI can be used for mental health as well. So I didn't know much about the mental health space before this. You hear all these buzzwords about mental health, but there is still such little awareness, right? I was really excited. I thought it would be a great learning experience for me, and I jumped at the opportunity. So this was around 2.5 years ago when I came on board, and we already, like, Wysa had just got its first round of funding, and it was starting to be seen as, a solution to mental health. The COVID years kind of propelled that recognition, right? As Dr. Parikh mentioned, that people started to look out for such options. And also during COVID, a lot of people were going through everyday mental health issues. They were feeling lonely, depressed, anxious, right, about what would happen. So I think it was the right time for Wysa to come in the hands of users and start being used. Yeah.
So, actually, what I'm really interested in knowing is, since Wysa is based on the AI chatbot would have been trained on a model, right? And AI, like we know, is usually data based. It is processing a lot of data, and so I just want to know, what were the initial data sets that you used or that you came across that you thought would be useful in creating this chat box?
So we didn't have any public data sets available for this particular domain, as you might find for other AI models, right? There are a lot of platforms like Kaggle where you will find a lot of public data sets for different use cases. But for mental health care, especially since it's private, sensitive information, such data sets were not readily available. So in the beginning, whatever models we created, the training data came from either internal use, our team themselves being the users and we testing on what a user is likely to say, or synthetic data creation. And as we started onboarding users, we started getting more actual user data, and we started incorporating that as well in our training sets to improve our models. So this model improvement is a never-ending process. We continuously refine our models. So even like now, almost 7 years down the line, we continue to do that, and but that's how it started.
So I was actually going through your website, and you've mentioned there that you don't actually use the data from anyone who uses the app. So how come you're constantly updating your app through this very data? Could you clarify that a little?
We don't collect or use any PII, which is personally identifiable information. So any information that can be used to uniquely identify a user, like name, address, age, sex, right? All of country, language, all of this is redacted or removed from whatever users may say this information while talking to the bot, but all of this is redacted from their messages before their messages are stored in our database. So nobody gets to actually see those messages. Even as data scientists and machine learning engineers, when we work on our models, we have to then fetch this data from the database, but it is already PII redacted. So we don't get access to any sensitive info. So that's what we mean. We don't collect any information. And also, like, Wysa doesn't require the users to sign on when they start using the app. They don't have to create an account. They don't have to provide a name or an email ID, right? So they can just install the app and start using it right away. They use a nickname for them. They can choose it whatever they want. And that's how Wysa refers them as, but they don't have to provide their actual name. Yeah.
Interesting. So this is a general question to you, Dr. Parikh. Like, we're talking about data, but for the longest time, psychology as a subject is believed to be very subjective. So how quantitative can such data be?
No, you cannot say that. That's not true. Science is science. We don't mix science and art here. Psychology is a science. Psychiatry is a science. It's not a form of art. It's not subjective, right? The moment we start using these words, we are diluting the fact that we are talking about a science. So if you go to a psychologist anywhere across the globe, and if you are having depressive features, then wherever they are sitting, and if they diagnose you as depression, they are diagnosing you as depression because based on evidence, standardized guidelines, whether you follow the ICD or the DSM or any other school of thought, it's going to apply across the board, across the world, right? Similarly, treatment is again evidence based. So again, taking example of depression, wherever you are in the world, if it's mild depression, the guidelines are very clear. You'll start with therapy, which is the most common therapy, CBT. What are the various domains we'll be using? Or in some cases, again, well defined. You may use some of the other forms of therapy. Moderate onwards, you will use medications. If you are using medications, what is the start medication? If that doesn't work, what is the next? How do you define resistant depression? If there is resistant, what are the other techniques that you can use? So on and so forth. So to say that psychology is a subjective science is not true. But then what was never started as being subjective? I mean, let's be very clear about it. I mean, if we are going in history, then everything could have been subjective before there was evidence. But when we talk about modern day mental health, modern day psychology and psychiatry, let's be very clear about it. It's a science. And when it comes to psychiatry, it's medical science. I'm a medical professional. You go to your diabetologist, endocrinologist for diabetes. They work around your insulin for your glucose control. You come to me, I'll work around your serotonin for your anxiety or depressive illness. I mean, that's how it is.
So maybe subjective is the wrong word to use, but if we try to look at it as a quantifiable, something that can be converted into data to be used into AI. So have we started doing that recently, or have we been collecting data for a while to be able to program an AI model?
There are two aspects to what you are saying. I mean, let's say a few decades back, when the idea of AI would have not even occurred, or the idea of AI in healthcare wouldn't have occurred, how would one have done this? Right? You need something to also work with something. Right. And it's not that you are randomly collecting some papers and forms and you're feeding them into something. That's not how it works. The AI that one is talking about right now is a dynamic interface. It's not like a form where you do tick and cross and a subtotal comes and you say, okay, this is it. Understand the various domains and aspects, right? So when you talk about data, of course, like I said at the start also, science evolves. Anything that has to grow goes through its own evolution. Where we are today, we will not be here 10 years down the lane. But where we are today, we would have never imagined here 10 years back. So we need to be also open, careful, responsible, and frankly ethical.
So when you say that we need to be open to discussing about mental health and its evolution as a science with even with technology, I want to ask you how 5 years ago people were people receptive to having AI tools to consult when it came to psychology, and how are people reacting to it now? Are patients more open when it comes to telemental health helplines or things like that?
If you were to say pre-COVID, had you thought telemental health can work? And here, when I say telemental health, I'm talking psychiatry because obviously it's the prescription aspect I'm talking about. I'm not talking about counseling or psychotherapy. I'm talking pure psychiatry here. It didn't exist. If it didn't exist and there was no law, there was no allowance, there were guidelines, it just didn't exist. Now it does. So I'm comparing to a time when it didn't exist to where it does. So, of course, now one is evolving on how to go about it. For me, it has been an absolutely unbelievable journey and learning in the last 2 years, because I have seen, sitting in the national capital region here, would have never thought the sheer percentage of rural population I'll be able to see on the click of a button. To me, that has been the most overwhelming and humbling aspect of the digital telemental health. But telemental health is about access, and everything else is the same. When you talk about AI, you are bringing in an interface which is slightly different. So please understand the difference between the two as well. Don't club it. Mere telemental health and AI are not the same. They may be happening in the digital space, but everything that happens on the digital space is not AI, it's not telemental health, and thankfully, it's not social media.
Yeah, so I think we really need to create that distinction in between interacting with an actual professional, a doctor over the internet, which is what telemental health would be about, as opposed to what Dr. Gupta works on, which is an AI backed and AI based chatbot of sorts that also helps you through your mental health journey. So, Dr. Gupta, I want to ask you, when creating this chatbot, uh, do you have in mind a certain part of a person's mental health journey who is, let's say, seeking therapy, that we want the chatbot to be able to guide them into this, and after a point it moves to an actual professional, or do you think a chatbot can actually help a person completely? Is it supposed to be a support, or it's supposed to be the solution?
Sure. So, what Wysa is catering to is a large spectrum of people who sit in the middle of the mental health spectrum. And what I mean by that is that we have users who are, I mean, there are people out there in the world who are looking just for wellness solutions. You know, they don't have any mental health issues, but they want things like meditation apps, right? Or sleep stories, something to just keep them mentally healthy. But they are not going through any particular issues as such. Then there is at the other end of the spectrum is the diagnostic space, where you have clinical users, which Dr. Parikh must be dealing with, right? So, you know, people who are diagnosed with mental health issues like schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, clinical depression, and so on. We are not into either of these spaces. We are in the middle, where people are dealing with day-to-day mental health issues like loneliness, negative thoughts about themselves, anxiety, or not being able to sleep. So these are some problems which everyone deals with, and they don't need medication per se, right? Many of them don't, and many of them can be treated by just knowing how to deal with them yourselves. There are exercises, as Dr. Parikh mentioned, that there are different types of therapies that CBT is just one of them. But so there are different exercises, different tools that you can use to work on your mental health yourself. So Wysa is a tool, an AI-enabled tool to cater to these group of users, and it doesn't mean that there is no gatekeeping being done when a user comes and uses our app. We don't know which end of the spectrum they are on, right? They might very well be suffering from clinical depression, but there is no way. We don't do any of those checks beforehand. So anyone in the world can use Wysa, but we have safeguards, built into our app, so that the AI is capable of detecting if the user is at risk, if the user may actually be on the clinical end of the spectrum, in which case the AI bot itself suggests that they seek professional help. We also have human therapists on our app, right? In-house, they are not psychiatrists, they are therapists. But if a user needs additional help, if the AI is not working out for them so well for them, then they always have the option of taking therapy from a human as well.
So, ma'am, you made this very interesting point where you said that your AI tool is enabled to recognize when a patient might be going through a severe, they might be clinically depressed or have a severe diagnosis. So, how is it that your AI tool actually recognizes that this person is in need of human intervention, actual professional intervention?
Okay, so just a disclaimer: I'm not saying that we diagnose. We do not diagnose, but yes, we do look for any indications that this user might need more help than what we can offer. So, for example, our AI bot is looking out for any indications of suicidality or tendency to self harm, or if the user is talking about abuse. Similarly, we have some standardized assessments built in our app that Dr. Parikh also mentioned that are well established. They consist of a finite set of questions and with fixed options, so the user can. It's a self-assessment. User can answer those questions, and if they are found to be in the medium or high end of the range on that assessment, then we that is an indication of that the user might need more help. So the bot will direct them to seek that help, will encourage them to seek that help. So that's how.
So, Dr. Parikh, what would you say are some very clear limitations of where AI can be used in mental health, and are there any no-go areas?
No, there are no absolutes in life, right? Like I said, we are in a stage where more evolution is going to happen. Right now, where we are, which means given the deficit of experts, given the disproportionate availability of experts, given the sheer volume of people struggling, that it's huge. When you put that in a context, you need to be able to reach maximum number of people and provide them with whatever best we can do at a given moment in time. That's where, starting with the digital interface. So, if let's say you are living in a part of our country where the nearest expert to take medications for something as simple as, let's say, a panic disorder or a depressive illness or a bipolar, you may have to travel a day or two. You may need to put in a couple of days of your time, your caregiver's time, so on and so forth. And if you had to do more follow ups, you may not be able to do them because you will not be able to make this commute all over again in a frequency that clinically the doctor might be needing for, let's say, the best possible help that they can be given. That's where telehealth comes in the picture, right? Of course, if I see 100 people on telehealth, there might be a few whom I still might need to see them physically. Various factors where I would feel, no, this person needs to be seen physically. But there's also the case that after seeing 100 people in the physical domain, I may tell at least 60, 70 of them, you don't need to come every time to my clinic. We can do an online consult and that will also work. All of this increases access, makes it affordable, improves compliance, and the goal of treatment is achieved, and dropouts in the middle don't happen because of external factors. Right? This is one part of it. Now, what is AI doing or is trying to do? AI is trying to reach more people. Right? Let's keep it very simple. Right now, what's our first goal? Reaching more people. Second goal would be providing for what we can do the best at this moment in time until a lot more science grows and evolution happens of this aspect. Till then, what is the best that we can do? Understanding that what we are giving is not the solution. Nobody who's working in AI or working as a clinician like me is going to tell you that rather than going to a clinical psychologist or a psychiatrist, go to, let's say, any, and I'm not specific to Megha's work here, but to any AI. Nobody is going to say that. AI themselves are not going to say that to you, right? But we also have to understand hundreds of thousands of people can't do that. And because they're hesitant to do that, or reach is an issue. So how about giving them something now? And through that, if you can give basic guidance, basic counseling, you can do basic level of screening, almost like a semi-triage of sorts, where you can tell an individual, hey, we feel you may be having some features which are suggestive of, let's say, anxiety, which may not be something that we might be able to help you. Whereas if you do these 4-5 things, it will be good for you. But we recommend, why don't you see a psychologist or see a psychiatrist, and whichever way it goes, right? The idea needs to be very clear. You do what you can do and don't claim to be doing what you can't do. Don't try to do what you cannot possibly do. And that information needs to be undiluted. No statutory warning there. It needs to be as it is. So if there is no false pretext, if there is a clear understanding of what one is doing, and there is mechanism at a significant success rate, I mean, nobody will be at 100 on 100, at a significant rate, that if there is any marker suggestive of immediate intervention or an intervention required biologically or therapeutically, you go ahead and do that. I think that's where we are right now. If we try and stretch this and try to peep into the future, you would have not thought when I was in school there will be mobile phones, right? And all three of you were not born then. So try and understand this. So how can we say what will happen 10 years, 20 years, 30 years down the lane? Look at now, look at where we've come from over the last 3 years. It's promising. It looks like maybe we'll be able to help more people. And if more people can be helped, to me, that's what we have achieved if we are able to do that. And like I maintained, dignity, ethics, values. That's very important. And that's the only thing that, if at all you were to ask me if I have a red flag or I have a worry, my only worry is that humankind continues to lose its connect with values every now and then when it comes to adding a zero on the check, right? As long as humankind maintains its value system, we'll evolve into better people.
What I actually went to ask Dr. Parikh is, as a user of, let's say, an AI based chatbot today, what is it that I should know is the limitation of current technology that I should be aware of?
I'll give you a slightly different answer to this, and I'll let Megha also answer this question though. But try and understand this. I don't think it's only about the user. I think it's more the responsibility of the platform. And let's not confuse between the two. So, for example, you go on a certain social media platform, right? And now, if you are deciding to use a platform which is meant for sharing pictures, but you want to use that platform to gather information on medical knowledge, and you now decide to take medical knowledge from an individual who call themselves, let's say, an influencer, without having any medical knowledge, you have to figure who's more at fault, right? Is it the platform's problem? Is it your problem? Is it the self-proclaimed influencer's problem? There is also advice following every place. Also, there can't be a generic advice. Why? Because there will be different platforms doing different things. Today, we may have a few platforms which are doing some significant work, but clearly in a couple of years, we'll have many more platforms. One needs to understand what one is getting into, yes, but that happens through consistent information. And I strongly believe where we are today, a lot of onus lies on the platforms more than the user. It's the job of the platform to inform the user that this is what we do, this is what we don't do, this is the kind of help we can do, and this is the limitation of our advice, and this is the window within which we are working, right? So when Dr. Megha says that they are working in, let's say, if the spectrum was from 0 to 10, and they are working from, let's say, 3 to 6. But if a user thinks they are working from 0 to 10, then somebody needs to tell them, hey, we are only for 3 to 6. If you are 0 to 3, don't come here. If you are 6 plus, we are going to make sure you go to someone else. Or you first goes to someone else if you happen to come with us. So that onus lies on the platform. I don't think we are in a position to generalize this, because everybody with different platforms and the way they are doing in AI are at very different parts of this evolution. So we can't have a generic rule right now.
Dr. Gupta, I'd love for you to add on this, but I also have a question to ask when Dr. Parikh speaks about the responsibility of the platform and the user. So, of course, it's the onus of the platform to tell the user what it can and cannot do. But when we talk about a platform like this that has access to data about health, which is obviously sensitive, is the onus also on the platform to secure that data? Because just yesterday we had this major, massive breach of, the COVID vaccination portal, that is CoWIN. So is that also something the user will have to be concerned about, or are these platforms something that users can trust?
Absolutely. I mean, users should definitely be concerned about their privacy, the privacy of their health data, and platforms have to be ethical and responsible to take care of that data, secure that data, and from the users end, sure, every platform will have a privacy policy and terms of service, but it's such a long, big document, like, to be honest, right? How many of us read those, right? We just click on I agree and we move on, right? But so it's not just enough to say things in your privacy policy. You also have to make sure that while the user is using your platform, you are using their data in a way which does not breach their privacy, which does what you have promised them, that you are not collecting any private information, any personal information from what they share on this platform. There should be appropriate links within the app so that user can go and check what kind of data is being collected, what are the policies of the platform on what they share, who can read it, who can access it. So for us, for Wysa as an AI bot, apart from having all these policies in our privacy policy, or under the FAQ section on our website, right? Even during the conversation, a user might ask such questions that, who is reading my conversations, who is reading my messages, what do you do with my data? And we have our models trained on detecting such questions and responding appropriately to them. In today's world, especially in the healthcare domain, if you don't comply to these policies, right, there's thankfully like lot of compliance and lot of regulations are coming up. People are becoming aware of how important it is to secure such data. If you don't comply to those regulations, you'd soon be out of business. You won't be able to continue. And users are becoming aware that their data needs to be protected, right? So they also look for whenever they go to a platform, they look for a confirmation of this fact that their data is not being used, without their permission. So yeah, it goes both ways, but yes, I would say that it is definitely the platform's responsibility, because you cannot assume that the user would know about this, user would check this. So platform should definitely take care of that as well.
So, obviously, data privacy is one, but Dr. Parikh, what would you say are some other ethical concerns with the use of AI?
No, I think overuse would be an ethical concern to me, right? Oversell would be an ethical concern. I think staying within the domain of what your particular AI platform is able to do and standing by it and within that framework, I think is very important, because the risk always is promising more, trying to do more than what is possible to do. And that's where a concern is. I do feel that basic sensitivity towards how we react, mental health has largely been stigmatized, discriminated against for decades. This is not a now phenomenon. And the kind of responsibility that anyone has, whether you are a clinician working in a physical space or a clinician, mental health professional in the digital space, or an AI platform, we all have a responsibility that the basic respect, dignity, privacy, confidentiality, hope needs to be well taken care of. Because you make a mistake at one level with one individual, that's a Jenga effect. This individual may never come back. People around this individual may also feel this is not working. And again, the whole cycle of discrimination and stigma starts. To me, that's what is important. I don't think, and I completely agree that there will be more and more guidelines. There will be more and more aspects that people will have to comply with, and that's how it should be. I just feel it's good to know that we are trying to reach for solutions. I feel that the humbling aspect of, in spite of all that we've been doing for such a long time, we've probably made an impact of a droplet in an ocean, and the ocean is where the sheer problem of mental health lies. So until we continue to do what we are doing, it won't work. And that's why we'll have setbacks, we'll have problems. If our purpose is on track, I've always believed if your values are on track and if you work with basic sincerity, economic aspects will follow. I mean, as long as you don't follow the numbers and let values be your compromised, it's all fine. You let your values guide you, you get your numbers. That's the way I look at it, and that's the only way to ensure that the science of mental health, which can make absolutely life-altering experiences for people and take out hundreds and thousands of people across the globe who've been silent sufferers themselves and their families. It's a collective responsibility to ensure that we do something, and equity and equality are not just words. The disparity is reality, right? We need to beat the disparity, we need to beat the stigma and let people get help to the best that they can wherever they are, in the quickest possible manner, in the most affordable manner, where access is also an integral part of it. And that's the way to look at it.
That's very true, sir. You raise a lot of important points, which gives me a lot of questions to ask you actually. So one is that you've mentioned this twice throughout, that these platforms should not oversell or not overpromise what they cannot offer. So have you personally seen any such examples where where apps or AI tools have been promising more than they can deliver?
I mean, why just talk about AI, right? Look around yourselves. Look around an advertisement of a cosmetic. All sorts of lines are being crossed day in and day out all around us. So, and that's why I said, if you are doing it for the right reason, in the right manner, then it's not an issue. Human errors are human, but negligence, deliberately misrepresenting, misleading, that's unacceptable. And that's why there are guidelines, and I'm happy to see that there are evolving uh, aspects to comply norms, and there will be only more and more norms, which should be the case. I mean, everything should have a peer review mechanism. Everything needs to have a self regulatory body, and there needs to be an external regulatory body, because if there is a problem, then it needs to be addressed. That's life. You have it for medical practitioners as well. Rather than looking at who did what wrong, I've always believed that who does their own right well has to be the approach to life.
That's actually very true, sir. And I'd like to go back to the previous answer where you had said that you talked about medication, and I wanted to ask Dr. Gupta, can these AI tools actually prescribe medication to any client or customers or any users, actually, as you call them for your apps? Because a lot of these.
That's an unfair question to ask, Megha. No, they can't. Because there are guidelines who prescribes, who doesn't. And the only people who can prescribe medications are registered medical practitioners. Non medical practitioners cannot prescribe medications.
Yeah, but Garima, the way AI could help there, AI cannot prescribe medication. But in many use cases, AI is being used to just collect a patient's stats, physiological data, or whatever symptomatic data, and being able to triage the user, right? Being able to identify patterns and predict that, okay, this user might need to be seen by the doctor, right? So it can take away some of the burden of the clinician, but no, it cannot diagnose, cannot prescribe medication. Ultimately, there has to be a professional in the loop, human professional in the loop. AI can say, okay, this patient probably needs attention. Doctor, can you please look at this file, right? Look at this patient. They might need more attention than others. And then the doctor could probably prioritize their treatment. But ultimately, it has to be the human professional who has to do that.
And what about therapy? Can AI provide full-fledged therapy to
At this
a
moment in
user?
time, this is again a question which is a difficult one to answer, because therapy is not a generic umbrella, right? There are various kinds of therapies. So to say that can AI provide for therapy right now, again, is probably not the fairest of the questions, because we are now trying to enter a domain where we don't know is the answer right now. Right now, we have some evidence that AI is doing some contribution, and we need to build on it, see where it takes us. And rather than trying to overachieve, we shouldn't lose out on what we are in a position to achieve. Please understand the importance of that.
And that would be to increase access.
Increase access, give basic intervention, which may be significant for a lot of people struggling with issues, and to be able to guide them to the earliest intervention to the next level. Even if that much we are able to achieve consistently for a period in time, I think we would have done a remarkable job. We don't need to jump 20, 30 steps here. This particular step needs to be consolidated before we want to do the next big thing.
Right. Both of you also mentioned that while right now AI cannot provide therapy to people, this is something that we can build on in the future. So I actually wanted to ask you whether AI applications can be modeled with some sense of empathy or sensitivity when it comes to marginalized people. For instance, if I am a religious minority or if I am a gender or sexual minority, I would go to a psychiatrist or a psychologist who would understand that I might also have struggles because of my identity. Is this something that AI can also help us with?
Before Megha answers on AI, let me put a few clarifications here, right? If your statement is that I would like to go to a psychiatrist slash psychologist who would understand that I am from, let's say, a marginalized or a struggling background, that if does not exist. If that if exists, you're talking about an incompetent professional. Simple as that. I am not going to say that I am having affirmative towards this community, affirmative towards that community. I am affirmative per se.
I think where the question is also coming from is because it's an issue that has been flagged with AI before, is that it is based on pre-existing data that in itself might not be very equitable, right? There is a sort of inequality in how this data is collected, who it is collected from. And in this process, there are certain communities that are marginalized, and therefore we might not even have the data to be sensitive towards them. Because this is an issue that has been flagged with AI, is why we're asking Dr. Gupta, how do we plan on making our AI models more robust in the absence of such data?
Sure. So, to answer part of the question about can AI be empathetic? Absolutely. Wysa is very, very empathetic. It has been built into the design of Wysa that it is a friendly, empathetic, non-judgmental chatbot, right? So, irrespective of what issue you're coming in with, what is your background, you'll get the same empathetic responses for your problems, right? So, and I'll be talking mainly about mental health, sticking to mental health care here, that a lot of therapy, doesn't depend on what exactly happened, what situation you are in. It is more to do, at least for cognitive behavioral therapy or CBT, it has to do a lot with your thoughts and feelings and actions, right? Those are like that's the triad of CBT. So, I might be feeling depressed. There could be a million reasons for different users, right, for feeling depressed. But ultimately, what the bot needs to offer you tools and exercises for therapy is to know how you are feeling, what made you feel that way, and can you act on it to change that thought so that you feel better, right? So that takes care of one part of the question, that often this kind of detailed background information may not be needed for therapy, right? Empathy has to be offered to everyone, irrespective of their background. However, I do agree that it's possible that the AI model is trained on certain kinds of situations. So it's not trained to detect some of the challenges that might be cultural, that might be very specific to the individual. In which case, even though it's being empathetic, it's not able to, the user may feel unheard or not understood well enough, right? So again, there are two separate problems. Again, the kind of thing, Garima, you are asking about, it would require you to collect personal information about the user, which, frankly speaking, I don't think is needed. In fact, a lot of our users tell us that they feel very uninhibited when they talk to Wysa, precisely because Wysa doesn't know who they are, right? And they don't feel judged then. There is no human sitting behind that screen, and their chats are completely anonymous, and they are able to express even negative thoughts, dark thoughts, right? Whatever they want to say, they are free to express those. And Wysa will still be empathetic. So yes, and Anjali, I think the issue that you are referring to is the issue of bias in training data in AI models, which is, I agree. I mean, it is definitely an issue. It is a matter of concern, particularly for Wysa bot. It is since we don't go into, our responses or our way to approach CBT for a user doesn't change according to their background. Maybe it doesn't affect us so much, but definitely bias is an issue, and an AI model is only as knowledgeable or as good as its training data, right? So yes, if the training data has been collected only from, say, users from the US, right, then it is possible that the kind of problems they are talking about are very, very different from the kind of problems, say, a marginalized user from India would be talking about. However, the base assumption remains, at least in mental health therapy, is that the emotions that a human experiences still remain the same across the globe, right? So, since CBT is all about the user taking action themselves to improve their mental health, even when they talk about their thoughts, which might be about a very specific situation, the bot leaves it up to them. Bot guides them to reframe their negative thoughts, right, to a positive one. The bot does not need to know what exactly happened. It is definitely possible that people from different parts of the world or different strata of society express their thoughts about the same thing very differently. So if even across age groups, right? So a young person might express their thoughts very differently, use a very different language, right? It all boils down to the natural language here for a chatbot. So the language used can be very different. So yes, that is one aspect that the AI models have to be cognizant of and take care that it should be. If they know their target user base, then the models should take care of including those kind of addressing the language of their target users uniformly.
So I'm thinking here that the more people interact with this AI chatbot, so it's constantly improving itself, and the more interactions it has, it is bound to get better.
Yes, but again, since it's a healthcare space, you don't want to start off on a very weak base, right? So you have to be prepared well. You have to expect what the user might say and build your AI models robust enough to what you may get. But yes, it is, of course, a continuous process of improvement based on user data. But you have to start with a strong foundation as well.
So, when it comes to mental health, a lot of times it's said that a doctor can only help as much as a patient allows the doctor to help them. So I was just wondering if say person A goes to a psychiatrist or a psychologist in person and expresses what is stressing them out or what their troubles are, the doctor might convince them to, join another session, come back, and, talk about their problems again. Is there a mechanism for the chatbot to do that? Because what if I log in on the chatbot, I try to talk about my problems and I see that, the first two messages are not helping me and I just log off. So, is there a mechanism that the chatbot can deploy to help someone who actually needs help?
So one thing here you must add that this is not specific to mental health. This applies to healthcare per se. You may decide to go to an endocrinologist who prescribes you some lifestyle correction and medication for diabetes. If you don't decide to follow them, and if you're told to go off, let's say, sugary addicted drinks, but you continue to have them, the doctor, and if you visit the doctor, then the doctor may keep reminding you, but it comes down to you. But to say that you can be helped only as much as helped, and that's specific to mental health, actually not true. Mental health, on the contrary, has illnesses where the individual may not have the insight, and it's a part of the treatment to help the individual develop insight as well. So just look at it on that angle. The other aspect is, this is not completely correct, that if you were to gone to let's say a physical space and you'd gone to a psychiatrist or a psychologist and you decided not to go back to them, then they are supposed to respect your confidentiality and privacy needs. Because what if you decided to go to somebody else? And if they were to give you a call and say, okay, hey, you were supposed to come today, why have you not come today? You must come. And this individual might have started going to someone else or doesn't want to go right now, may want to do it later on. You are crossing a line here, right? So if somebody decides to leave a chat, and if you want the chatbot to now start chasing the person, that hey, complete the chat, We're again crossing lines here.
Yeah, so I wouldn't talk to that aspect of the question, but I'll mainly speak about the chatbot aspect. That a lot of users do come to us. They are skeptical about an AI being able to help them. So often they would search on the Play Store. They'll find this mental health app. They'll install it out of curiosity, and they will first test the AI. Right? They will ask questions about general knowledge, right? Because an AI is supposed to be smart, right? So AI is supposed to know everything. So they will test the waters first, and slowly the barriers come down, and they realize, oh, actually, this AI is understanding me. It's giving me pretty natural, human-like answers, and then they start opening up. In reality, they don't open up from like message one, right? They also want to understand who they are talking to better before they open up. And I think so that there is no distinction between AI versus a human professional in that respect, that even if a user doesn't feel comfortable with a human professional, right, they will not open up. So it's about establishing that trust, establishing that level of comfort which is present in with both AI as well as a human professional.
Yeah, all right. So I think that would be a good note to end this podcast on. And if Dr. Parikh and Dr. Gupta, you have any closing comments, please feel free to take the mic.
I'd just like to say that I think it's very important to build awareness around mental health, which is thankfully happening. And anyone who is working on mental health, or anyone who is struggling with mental health, we should together try to remove the stigma attached to it, and make it more accessible, affordable for everyone. That's it.
I think the thing to accept that we evolve, science evolves. What we have right now, we should maximize it to the best that we can, learn from it, grow with it, not be in a rush, not be in a hurry, don't cross a line. Promise what you can, don't promise what you can't. Access to mental health needs to be seen as the fundamental right, like other fundamental rights of our life. Because when you struggle with your mental health, everything else becomes secondary, not just for you, but for your loved ones. In spite of what we perceive as a lot of awareness, especially all the conversations on social media, truth is that globally, less people seek help than those who don't seek help because of stigma. That's the truth. Then there is access, which is a concern. Disparity of availability of experts is a concern. Cost is a concern. There are so many aspects. If we can bridge some of these, whether it's through telehealth, whether it's through an evolving AI, it'll all help us create the impact that future generations can benefit from, because mental health concerns are real, mental illness is real, silent strugglers not getting help is real, and it needs to be something that should be a priority for all of us.
Thank you so much for your time, Dr. Parikh and Dr. Gupta. It was lovely speaking to you. I'm pretty sure a lot of my very, very basic doubts have been cleared in this conversation, and I have realized a lot of points where I had made some assumptions which were not true, and which I'm guessing a lot of our listeners might also have. Garima, over to you.
Yeah, I totally agree with Anjali. A lot of my doubts have also been cleared, where I've I had been unintentionally clubbing AI with tele mental health and all of these things. Just minute details also, but very basic things that I had previously missed on. But thank you so much for taking out the time, Dr. Parikh and Dr. Gupta. And thank you so much for being on this podcast and helping us out today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so Garima, how do you feel about this conversation and what has changed pre and post this 1 hour?
So for me, I think a lot of my doubts have been cleared because अभी तक मैं AI और digital tools को एक umbrella term समझ रही थी, and a lot of the logistics that come with combining AI with mental health, उन सब के बारे में मेरे काफ़ी doubts clear हुए हैं, so that's a good thing, I think.
But have your concerns related to AI and its use in mental health, have they remained the same?
A little bit, because guidelines की कमी अभी भी है, and yet again हमारे जो data sets हैं, they might come from like a biased place, so there are concerns about the privacy of our data, about how much access it can actually grant. तो कुछ concerns हैं जो रहेंगी, but what do you think about it?
वो तो रहेंगे जब तक एक बहुत strict policy does not come into place, या फिर there are very very strict guidelines that these apps have to abide by. जब तक वो नहीं होगा तब तक obviously it's not like that the apps will stop doing what they do, just that the consequences aren't as big as they should be. But I feel like as a primary exposure of people struggling with mental health, AI can prove to be a very very accessible, like we spoke about, a very very accessible and affordable medium to know just the very basics. But that is what users should know, that it is as basic as that, and it is not an alternative for a human psychologist, at least with the technology that we have currently.
Of course, as Dr. Parikh and Dr. Gupta also said, right now what we have is the opportunity to build on existing infrastructure with the help of AI and not suddenly transform the world of mental health through AI. Even this opportunity is a big deal in itself, because इसकी वजह से हो सकता है काफ़ी रिसोर्सेज ओपन अप हो जाएं लोगों के लिए. बट इसके साथ एक ये कंसर्न भी है कि ये AI टूल्स उनके पास ही होंगे, वही लोग एक्सेस कर पाएंगे जिनके पास ऑलरेडी या तो फ़ोन हो या लैपटॉप हो या कुछ अमाउंट ऑफ प्रिविलेज हो ये चीज़ें अपने पास लेने का. दैट इज़ एन एरिया जहाँ पे अभी डिस्पैरिटी है, बट विद द वे AI इज़ ग्रेजुअली प्रोग्रेसिंग, that is an area that should be covered, hopefully.
Like we've already discussed, it still has a lot of stigma attached to it. So even if we do put these apps in the hands of these people, we still need to take very concrete efforts in convincing them that this is something that is helpful for you, that you should be seeking mental health care if you need. AI can do a big role in that also. Like if somebody who is unaware of what words like anxiety and depression even mean, and if these AI chatbots can explain it to them like a human psychologist would, then उससे काफी awareness space में भी help हो सकती है.
If you know, the AI chatbots can actually work across different languages, different dialects, and help users in the way that they understand. बहुत ही बेसिक ब्रेक डाउन कर दें इन टर्म्स का जो बहुत जार्गनाइज्ड हो गए हैं, तो दैट वुड ऑल्सो बी अ ह्यूज स्टेप. बिकॉज आप किसी को बस ये बता दो कि उनके जो नियरेस्ट साइकोलॉजिस्ट या साइकियाट्रिस्ट जो एक ट्रस्टेड प्रोफेशनल हैं, उन तक जाने का आप रास्ता बता दो, वो भी बहुत बड़ी चीज़ है आज के टाइम में.
बट वुड यू go to an AI chatbot to seek mental health care?
Maybe out of curiosity, but if I would really need help at this point of time, I'd think maybe human intervention would be better.
So here's the thing, where I think that I would be using an AI chatbot is when I feel like going to a psychologist is a bit too much. Sometimes, because that is still what a lot of people do feel, and even I sometimes feel that do I really need to go to a psychologist for this? Is it even that big? Is a feeling that I get at times. And if in such cases, if I can go to a chatbot who can maybe tell me that, listen, you need to go and see a psychologist, or okay, this is what you're feeling, maybe it is not as severe as you think it is, and these are the things that you can do, then maybe I think that is one place that I would use an AI chatbot.
That makes sense. But that also sounds like तुम खुद को gaslight कर रही हो कि तुम overreact कर रहे हो.
एग्जैक्टली मैं करती हूँ एक्चुअली, मेरा थोड़ा पर्सनल प्रॉब्लम है. बट वही मैं कह रही हूँ, अगर मुझे चैटबॉट बता दे कि लिसन अंजलि, यू आर गैसलाइटिंग योरसेल्फ, यू शुड सीक मेंटल हेल्थ एडवाइस, देन दैट वुड बी अ स्टेप इन द राइट डायरेक्शन, आई वुड से, फॉर मी पर्सनली.
यार ये तो हम ही बता देते हैं अंजलि, जाओ यार थोड़ा थेरेपी लो.
करती हूँ. Okay, so Garima, I think that was an interesting chat. I think we can conclude it here. Thank you so much for coming on this podcast, armed with research and questions, and taking Prateek's place for this podcast.
Yes.
I'm sure it was not an easy task.
Sorry, Prateek. I hope I lived up to your expectations. But this really was an informative chat, and it was fun too. So, yeah, I'm glad I joined. Thank you for letting me.
Yes, you are always welcome on The Big Story. Alright guys, thank you for listening, everyone who tuned in. I hope you learned what we hoped you would. Please check out all the episodes of The Big Story, and especially the first one of this series where we really get deep into AI policy and what should come before the development of more and more AI apps, and what are the concerns that we were really talking about, and how bad can it be. So I really hope that you tune into that podcast and keep listening to us, keep listening to our other shows, and keep giving us love and support. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye. Can I add something?
Please do.
If you learned nothing else from this podcast, I hope you learned this. कि तुम हम लोग की तरह बहुत ही बेशर्मों वाले बहुत ही बेसिक क्वेश्चंस पूछ सकते हो.
तुम्हें हो सकता है थोड़ी डांट भी पड़ जाए,
हाँ,
बट नेवर स्टॉप आस्किंग क्वेश्चंस.
कुछ सीख के ही जाओगे. The Big Story is a Quint original podcast, executive produced by Shelly Walia and Ritu Kapoor. This episode was produced and edited by Anjali Palor and Prateek Lidhu, hosted by Anjali Palor and Garima Sadhwani. The background music is from BMG Production, and a special thanks to our guests, Dr. Samir Parikh and Dr. Megha Gupta.
You were listening to the Quint's podcast.